Explain like I'm 5. What happens if you drink isopropyl rubbing alcohol? So I just watched a video of someone chug a bottle of rubbing alcohol that you would get from the pharmacy. It's still alcohol though, so why is it bad? Also, what likely happened to the guy who chugged the bottle? And do not put it in anyone else's drink as a prank. My friend took a big swig of rubbing alcohol, thinking it was his vodka. I wasn't there at the time, but from what I heard, he was KO'd for the night. Different types of alcohol are totally different chemicals, not just different preparations of the same thing. Isopropyl alcohol might get you a little drunk, but not the same as ethyl alcohol, the alcohol in alcoholic drinks. It's also very irritating to your stomach and can cause severe pain, vomiting, and bleeding from your stomach. Fortunately, you're not likely to die. Metabolizing isopropyl alcohol produces a lot of acetone in your blood, but your body is pretty good at getting rid of that. Other alcohols like methanol are much more toxic and can cause death and other permanent bad stuff. Other alcohols like methanol are much more toxic and can cause death and other permanent bad stuff. Blindness would be the main one. Pretty classic stuff for bad moonshine distillation. Fun fact, blindness from moonshine was largely prohibition propaganda. They purposefully added methanol to alcohols for industry use to make it undrinkable. Alcohol is a fairly broad title, chemically speaking. It simply describes a small part of the molecule that makes up all alcohols. The difference comes in with the rest of the atoms that make up the molecule. Each one is its own unique chemical. In the case of isopropyl alcohol, you will not get pleasantly drunk. It doesn't interact with our system that way. It can dissolve the lining of your stomach in high enough doses and damage your digestive tract. In low doses, it causes severe intestinal discomfort and nausea. Drinking a mere 8 ounces of 90% pure isopropyl alcohol can kill an adult male. So depending on the potency of the isopropyl alcohol he drank, he could die or be hospitalized in severe pain as they pump his stomach. Explain like I'm 5. The lower your resting heart rate, the better. True? Why? Resting heart rate is just one indicator of cardiovascular health. Generally speaking, a lower heart rate means each pump of your heart moves more blood per pump. That means your arteries aren't blocked and still elastic. Oh, so that's what it is. Thank you for the simple explanation. I had a rowing coach who was a multi-time Olympian and at one time was, by rowing machine times, the fastest person in the USA. At that point, his resting heart rate was 65. My resting rate when competitive was in the 30s, and I was a ways from his times. As a population measure, it's not bad. If your resting heart rate is climbing over the years, you're probably not getting healthier. But one person's resting rate versus another's for health, that's not super predictive. Wait, your resting heart rate was in the 30s in BPM? That's really low, damn. Doctor here? Untrue. Lower resting heart rate while physically active without underlying heart conditions can be a sign of good cardiovascular health, but not always. Anything outside of this narrow specific definition makes the statement untrue. If you aren't physically active or if you have underlying heart conditions, a lower heart rate could be bad. Also, if you're physically active and don't have underlying heart conditions, not having a lower heart rate doesn't mean you don't have good cardiovascular health. I have been thinking about that for a long time. I consider myself to be in above average physical condition. I do not drink or smoke, and my blood tests show no problems. Nonetheless, my resting heart rate is 75/90, which drives me crazy. Explain like I'm 5. What is E? I find it used in numbers that are mind-bogglingly large, but I don't know what it really means. It's called scientific notation. For really large numbers, we can notate them as a number multiplied by 10, raised to whatever exponent is needed. So for instance, instead of writing out 563,000 season every time, we can shorten it to 5.63 to 1017. E just replaces the TUPS 10 part. So 563E17. Finally, today I learned. Sometimes you'll see it as EE2. But don't confuse either of those with E, which is Euler's number, approximately 2.71828. How does it feel to go through life and knowing stuff? I'm not even joking. Do you feel like you understand everything you need to know? I assume you mean E as used in scientific notation? It's shorthand. 5e plus 6 or 5e6, lowercase e also works, basically just means 5 tenths, which means takes 10 and multiple it by itself 6 times, then multiply that by 5. That 6 is basically telling you number of zeros you will have. So that's 5,000. 5 by 10's forward would be 50,000. As you mentioned, that's really helpful for really, really big numbers. Like I can write 6 by 10 really easily, but it would take me a while to type that out, and even longer to read it. And I would probably screw up both of those. As for why we do that with E, I'm not really sure. I've always assumed it was a limit with old screens that could display 5E plus 6, but maybe not display 2 by 1066. I think it stands for exponent or something like that. Simple answer, E is the number of zeros after the number. 5E0 means no zero added, so it's only 5. 5E1 means 1 zero added, so it's 50. Explain like I'm 5. How come soft drink companies have their own people set up displays in supermarkets and gas stations, instead of the workers having to put it out like the other products? It's not just soft drinks, but the salted snacks brands and cereal brands, and others, often have their own people do stock management and display. In part, they want to be sure they are shelved correctly. They pay the stores for a certain amount of shelf space, and this way they can ensure they get the full space allotted to them. Encroaching on other brands' shelf space is common. They also want to make sure it's displayed on the shelves neatly. The stores like vendors doing the stocking. BC then the store makes money off of shelf space rental. The store avoids the costs of inventory, so it greatly increases the profit margin. Simple example. Store buys widget for $91, sells it 1 year later for $100. Gross profit per year is 10%, but the store had to pay $9 interest on the money tied up in inventory, so it broke even. Or the store rents the shelf space for $9 a year, and it is all gross profit. Of course, there are other costs in maintaining the space, but most of those costs occur regardless of which system is used. So in your example, does the store not make money selling the product? So Coke rents space at your local grocers, stocks the space, and then when the product is sold, the grocer pays that back to Coke? Depends on the arrangement with the store chain. It's not a space rental, it's just a way to ensure the area needed to display everything they want is available. The store still buys and sells product. The whole point-of-sale reporting system is really detailed for every SKU, item code. The inventory is brought in and counted. The sales are reported. The store sometimes pays based on inventory brought in minus returns, sometimes via point-of-sale reports, sometimes a combination. The store chain also gets a payment from the vendor for shelf space allocated, with an extra cost for end caps, end-of-the-aisle displays, for special promotions. These are not usually the store's idea. Not all brands provide shelf and inventory management, just the brands that consider it a priority. The other stuff gets stocked by the store employees. Grocery stores, gas stations are like real estate. All these suppliers are competing for a limited amount of space to put their products in. Suppliers will offer whatever they can, including favors such as stocking shelves, to get more real estate via displays or extra shelving. More real estate on shelves displays means more products, bigger variety of products being put into the store, which means more sales for the supplier. Since one supplier is already offering these favors, everyone else now has to do the same in order to stay on equal footing. This is done for a lot of products besides soft drinks. Companies pay for prime placement of their products. Part of that payment, and also to ensure it's displayed how they want, is sending their own people to do it. Grocery stores set up contracts where they essentially rent shelf space. Vendors, like soda bottlers, are expected to stock their own goods on those rented shelves. Explain like I'm 5. Why do people occasionally have intrusive thoughts like jump when up high or swerve into traffic when driving? It seems like enough people share this experience that it's pretty normal, but why? It seems completely contrary to survival as a species. Intrusive thoughts like that are your brain's way of saying, hey, I just thought of this, it might be dangerous. What happens if we do it? Most of the time, you realize that would be dangerous and don't do it, but it can also scare you away from hanging out on cliffs or places where you'd fall, because you get that sudden fear that you are going to do it, which prevents you from accidentally falling. Our brains like to psych us out. The brain's job is to present options. Then it votes, more or less to use a bad metaphor, on which option is most viable. Intrusive thoughts are just those options. That's an interesting way to put it. Sometimes it's less of a thought and more of an urge. It can be terrifying sometimes. An intrusive thought is just a random thought. As soon as you have it, you evaluate, decide it's absurd, and discard it. There's no intent or desire behind having the thought. It doesn't reveal any dark secrets about yourself. Since there's no desire behind it, it doesn't actually lead to action, and therefore survival isn't brought into the equation. Interestingly, depression and anxiety have a lot to do with whether we pay attention to these thoughts, which can make them distressing. For example, a normal, sleep-deprived, stressed-out parent might have a brief thought of smothering their baby to get them to stop crying. Normal process is that it's a flash of a thought, then gets evaluated as absurd and unhelpful, and you barely register that you had it. A mother suffering from postpartum depression might have the same thought, but then overreact to it, thinking it must mean she's a bad mother, or that she has some impulse to kill her child, and she's dangerous. By giving too much weight to the thought, she can cause herself distress. I've been curious about this as I experienced it throughout my life, and noticed it got a little more frequent after having kids. I did some Googling about this in the past, and it's a common phenomenon referred to as call of the void. There hasn't been much research into it, with only one study done to date. I have an anxiety and depression diagnosis and had PPA, PPD, and PTSD after my first. It would seem this experience is in line with the researchers' hypothesis about anxiety sensitivity, and my belief is my call of the void got slightly worse after kids as my anxiety levels also increased and I was constantly in fight or flight mode. Well, that's another episode of Explain Like I'm 5 in the books. I really appreciate all of you who made it this far into the video. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, it would really help the channel out a lot if you gave the video a thumbs up, subscribe, or leave a comment down below. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.